I guess you all might know that Hong Kong is located on the southern edge of China. So we are south. It was a fishing village when it became the British colony in 1942. So Hong Kong has a really unique situation because we were the British colony, and we now belong to China. So the political situation of Hong Kong a unique place to shelter people from the north, those civilian, those intellectual merchants and civilians during the war, the Civil War or the World War II in China. After the Japanese surrender, the Civil War pushed China into a situation of civil unrest. Hence, Hong Kong has a long history. When the economy started booming in the 70s, after World War II, Hong Kong started transforming to a financial and cultural hubs. We have artists from the West, and the exhibition presented by the City Hall Museum and the Art Gallery, and also the cultural consulate in Hong Kong left a great impact to the young artists back then. Through recent decades, Hong Kong woodblock printing are slowly separating from the roots from the modern woodcut movement and developed a unique voice, a contemporary one. This paper, what we are going to will investigate the development of woodblock printmaking in Hong Kong from the 1930s to today. So what we are going to see the images today are mostly from the Hong Kong Museum of Art and the Hong Kong Heritage Museum of Art from their print collection. So what we are looking here at the first slide is because before we have everything happening in the art scene, so woodblock printing has been widely applied in the printing industry. So this is a traditional woodblock printing in the 70s. Unfortunately, we no longer have such work printing shop in Hong Kong anymore. This is the last one. So this factory closed in 1976. So this is the picture was taken a year before it closed down. So as you can see, that the printer there are printing. They print. The Sau-mui Yung has been running it's a family business for 4 generations in Hong Kong. So it's something really unique. But their print product was not only sold in Hong Kong, they also sold in to the Southeast Asia, as far as to North America in its golden year. So it closed in 1976, and at the time, using woodblock printing was already a sunset industry. So this is the paper offering that's printed by woodblock printmaking at that time in the 70s. Is from the Heritage Museum collection. Is clothing for the for the people who passed away. When we back to the comment to the woodblock printing has been. So there's a really important key figure person. Oops. So he is the key Lu Xun, is the key figure of the playing a key figure in the modern woodblock printmaking in the 30s. So the picture was taken in 1931 in Shanghai. He invited Japanese paint artist Yoshiyama to Shanghai to conduct a week-long workshop. This week-long workshop left a great impact to the modern woodblock print movement in China. So this group already less than 20 people, and most of them, every one of them this student, this young man there, or every one of them has play a key leading role in the modern woodcut movement. So Lu Xun initiated the movement in Shanghai. Also left it was in Shanghai, but it also left traces of impact to Hong Kong woodblock printing. Under his Lu Xun's leadership, woodblock printing has become a really expressive form, which fit the need of that time, because it's easy, it's expressive, and it's budget. So it's because of this, it's best fit the social change in China in the 30s. He organized workshops and create exhibition and published print catalog to promote woodblock printmaking. Lu Xun has a significant influence to the progressive young artists in China. Tong-Ying Wei, 1915 to 2000, and Huang Xinbo were two of them, so which I will further introduce them. So this is the work by Tong-Ying Wei in 1936. Tong-Ying Wei never met Lu Xun in his lifetime, but they communicate a lot, not with WhatsApp or email. They So Tong-Ying Wei wrote to Lu Xun and seek for his comment. He sent his print to Lu Xun for comment to Shanghai. And those correspondence was published in the complete work of Lu Xun. So perhaps this is the most ambitious work of Tong-Ying Wei. It's an illustrated print. It's about 2 meters long. So the whole length is about 2 meters long. So it's illustrative woodcut for a non-fiction novel titled "A Day in China," which is nearly about to convey the life in China on a really specific day, May 21st, 1936. So the composition, there's over 100 characters here demonstrating Tang's skill and his passion of the media. Tang left China and settled in Hong Kong in 1938, and he made his living as a botanical illustrator until his retirement. So Tang has this is the detail of A Day in China. So as you can see, is at the time he was slightly over 20, less than 30 years old. So and this is the catalog that he published in 1941, a scenery of Hong Kong, and it's an admiralty in Hong Kong. And also this is a catalog printed in 1960. I think you can see the differences between these two. In the catalog published in 1941 still have a really strong sense of the modern woodcut movement. But in the one in the 60s is a floral print, it's a woodcut print. And I think perhaps it's a reflection of his life in Hong Kong, more relaxed and refined. So this is Lu Xun, and this is the artist that we are going to talk about is Huang Xinbo. So compare with Tong-Ying Wei, his fellow printmaker, they were peers. His fellow printmaker, Huang Xinbo, 1916 to 1980, took another path of life. Huang was the pioneer of the modern Chinese woodcut movement. He met Lu Xun in Shanghai in 1936. At the time, he was only 18 years old. This gentleman here. Lu Xun has a really significant impact to Huang Xinbo. So influenced his life and his work. Huang Xinbo fled to Hong Kong after World War II. He lived in Hong Kong for 3 years, from 1945 to 1948. So during his stay in the city, so he completed a series of woodcut printing. So this I'm going to show you two of them here. After selling his blood, and by the Happy Valley in Hong Kong. So it's all about, his subject matter is all about the struggle of life, people's life after World War II. So his bold and heroic images is to convey the people's life at that time. All through Huang's life, he died in 1980, and he went back to China in 1949. Huang witnessed the establishment of the People's Republic of China, experienced all the political movement in China, Cultural Revolution is included, and also the economic reform in the 90s, and he died in 1980s. So when Tang Yingwei focused his profession as a botanical illustrator and Wang Shenbo worked in the cultural bureaus in China, there were few artists in Hong Kong to bridge up the traditional and paving the path to the contemporary printmaking in Hong Kong. Lei Laodang, so it's a he was an overseas Chinese. He was born in Indonesia, and then he went back to China during World War II. He studied printmaking in Chongqing Central University, and then he moved to Hong Kong in 1958. His subject matter is about the life in Hong Kong, especially the country life in Hong Kong. So this is a Tai O, is a place in Hong Kong. It's a fishing village, but you no longer see such scene in Hong Kong. Hardly to see it because Hong Kong is now quite high-rise building everywhere. So I don't see anyone is planting rice. So it's gone. The images are gone. But I think it's a good way to let us see in the 70s, early 70s, how it looked like in the country. And also Wu Chonggai. He was born in China and Guangzhou, and he studied printmaking in the Guangzhou Art Academy. He moved to Hong Kong in 1963, and he's a key player to promote water-based moku-hanga, water-based printmaking in Hong Kong. So Ta Mun is also a fishing village, remained unchanged. It's a print done in 1981, so it's from the heritage, from the Museum of Art collection. So his subject matter is all about the scenery in Hong Kong. Zheng Yi. He was the head of the department head of the Department of Fine Art Chinese University of Hong Kong. Zheng Yi, he was born in 1936. On the other hand, he graduated from the National Taiwan Normal University in 1958. He took references from the technique of Chinese footprint, somehow like what we have just seen from the Sun Yunfa, the Chinese New Year print. He took references from the technique of Chinese footprints and inspired by the antique script here. He has a series of woodblock printed completed in the mid-60s. This is done in the 1964 water-based woodblock printing. So as I would like to emphasize the color scheme as well. The red, the blue, and the black is originated from the Chinese woodblock print, Chinese New Year's print, footprints. The color scheme from the Chinese footprint. In Zheng Yi studied etching at the Pratt Institute with a one-year grant from the Institute of International Education in 1965. And then he back to Hong Kong and teaching at the Chinese University and then become the department head since from 1984 to 1992. So he's now retired, living in the Springs, California. Also, this is one of his earliest prints, printed in 1966. So a contemporary, Jerry Guan is another artist. Perhaps 1970 is the most vibrant era that not only shaping Hong Kong as a financial hub, but also a cultural hub in the region. As an international city and a gateway to mainland China, Hong Kong drew people from all around the world, while there was a small group of artists study abroad with the overseas funding from or from the Hong Kong government with the government scholarship. When the post-war print renaissance was at its height in the 70s, most of the awardee, Jerry Guan was one of them, studied printmaking at the institution like Prague Institute, Atelier 17, and Bright Institute, to name a few. They introduced contemporary printing to the higher education system when they come back to Hong Kong. In the meantime, there were artists from the West teaching printmaking, ukiyo-e, and impressionism at the public institution. And also there are artists took references from the traditional woodblock printing and applied it in their project. The opening of the City Hall Museum and Art Gallery in 1962, now become the Hong Kong Museum of Art, as a milestone of the development of the contemporary art in Hong Kong. There was 68 contemporary printmaking exhibitions staged at the City Hall Museum and Art Gallery from its opening to 1980s. Aside from staging local print art, there were print exhibitions from Japan, Taiwan, France, the United States, England, and Germany. The Hong Kong Museum of Art now holds an amazing print collection acquired in the 70s and the 80s. The collection included ukiyo-e and the contemporary print from the international renowned printmakers. Under the backdrop mentioned above, Hong Kong young artists soon realized the possibility of printmaking. Water-based woodblock print in particular is because woodblock printing doesn't require processes like etching and lithography do. The technique and medium are similar to Chinese painting and watercolor, so that they can acquire the skill more easily. Jerry Guan here, 1934 to 2008, he was a painter. He obtained his BFA from Columbus College and Design, Ohio, and MFA from Syracuse University of New York. He was the recipient of the National Endowments for the Art Fellowship in 1995. He first investigated water-based woodblock printing at the Certificate of Art and Design Epistemological Department, the University of Hong Kong. So this is his printing, his woodblock printing, which is done in 1972, now in the Hong Kong Museum of Art collection. And there's another one, artist, Chen Ying. He is now teaching at Kentucky. He graduated from the University of Oklahoma and also from the University of Cincinnati. He studied water-based woodblock printing in the 70s at the University of Hong Kong. He also references the 10 bamboo studio letter paper, which is a Woodblock print letter set during the 17th century. This print earned Chen an award of the Hong Kong Contemporary Art Biennale in 1977. So his subject matter is about the way is a wall used but never filled is from Laoji. So it was his subject matter. Actually, I think it's an interesting discovery when I was preparing the paper for this conference, and when I checked with the Hong Kong Museum of Art collection, and I found this gentleman, Clifton Kapu, in the collection of Museum of Art and stayed as the local art collection. I guess as you all know that he was an American. It's also a key printmaker in the Kyoto art community. Kapu, an American who was born in Minnesota, he studied at the Minnesota Art School from 1950 to 1952. And then he moved to Japan as a missionary. He started learning moku-hanga in Kyoto and soon took a leading role in the printmaking community there. And when I was studying it, I was wondering why he is in the local art collection, in our local art collection. So, so this is the print that he did in Hong Kong in the late in 1978. I guess it's just a guess. It's a commission from the Hong Kong Tourist Board or from the Cathay Pacific, because all those images are the tourist board in Hong Kong, the Cat Strip in 1978, and the Hong Kong Island, I believe, is Aberdeen. So you also can find this tourist spot in the tourist book here nowadays. So it's an interesting discovery for us, and to me, I guess we have to do more study and research on his work, and how many more he printed in Hong Kong, and how he associated with the Hong Kong art community. Okay, here, this is one of my favorites. So Wang Keiji, he was born in 1945, passed away in 2010. He was a multidisciplinary artist. He was a painter, an author, and also an expert on Mandarin pop after 1945. Wang, he didn't major in printmaking or art. He majored in English and further studied communication in the United States. He learned printmaking, water-based printmaking from Wuchang Gate, where I showed you earlier. So it's a printing. Actually, he's a painter. This is a print that he did for his birthday. It's about his birthday, and he was 36 at that time. A lively self-portrait. And the Chinese writing is about I'm slightly over 36. I don't want to speak anything more. Time flies, and I have to. So I prepare myself a portrait. I make myself a self-portrait. So it was printed in 1984. So it's a moku-hanga. It's a woodblock print, water-based printing. And also, it's his print in 1988. Something interesting about this print is actually the images is from a photography that he it was taken in New York, and then he used the age with a photocopier to do the color separation. So he copied the picture with several impressions from lightness to darkness. And then he transferred the images onto the woodblock and carve out and print them. So the use of photocopier offer offer Wang Keiji a new direction, and also his fellow printmaker in Hong Kong to Tang Wok-fai. He was born in 1954, studied printmaking also at the University of Hong Kong in 1976. His subject matter is about the urban landscape in Hong Kong, and this is about the Central in the 80s, where you can see the modern skyscraper and the traditional townhouses placed together with multi-perspective. So the composition stitch up the past, the present, and the future in one composition. There's another artist who was born in the late 50s. His name is Ben Walsh. He graduated from the Fine Art Department, the University of Hong Kong, at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and then further studied printmaking at the University of Alberta. It's a print that he did in the 80s when he was a student at the University of Hong Kong. The Romance of Imperial Capital series, completed in 1987. He was inspired by the illustration of the classic Chinese novel and studied moku-hanga technique when he was back then. The color scheme, I think, is telling us a worldly romance about it. So it's now housed in the Hong Kong Heritage Museum collection. Zhang Zhongqu, I guess you might see him walking around on the campus in the conference in this day, and he will have a demonstration tomorrow morning at 10. He claimed himself as a choreographer. He worked with ceramic and a printmaker, and he worked with etching and woodblock printing. He based in Hong Kong, and he said that working on a piece of wood block is no different from working on the shin paper, on the rice paper. So what he would do is he would write, apply choreography on the wood block directly. So you will see him how to do it from zero tomorrow. He will. I can't use the word if it's drawing. It's a drawing or writing, because in choreography he writes on the wood block. But for moku-hanga, that we will say he write on the wood block or he draw on the wood block. So this is his choreography, and then he carved it. And actually, the title of his demonstration tomorrow is a reverse negative. He doesn't use a barrier to print his print. He uses an etching press. So, so if you want to see his demonstration, then you have to go to the etching studio to see how he uses an etching press to print his woodblock print, water-based woodblock printing. This is the Book of Songs. The Book of Songs is the Asian poetry, the Chinese poetry. His choreography applies ink on the woodblock directly, carve out the negative images, and ink up the plate and run through the press to get the impression. So the print to himself, to the artist, become a narrative, not poem in themselves, but the negative. And he's researching, investigating the negative and the positive space by the really bold brushstroke. So the print was done in 2015, and this is also the most recent work and also the last work that I will introduce here in this afternoon. And Jane Curious, among all artists mentioned before, then they all are most of them, he also studied art and design in UK, but now he is a singer of an independent band in Hong Kong. So 12 Zodiac was done 2 years ago. So it's a series of books, 12 woodblock print. So as you can see, this is the year of cow, ox, the year of tiger, the year of rat, sheep. No, this is cow. This is pig. So he studied graphic design and illustration at Northbrook College in UK. He has been drawing on woodblock. There was a point that he realized his intensive printing, a drawing somehow similar to wood engraving. He then started exploring the media. So the print here, completed in 2015, based on the traditional motif from the Chinese woodblock folk art, but he twisted around. The subject matter is really dark. Actually, 12 Zodiac is a folk print of mostly celebrate the New Year's. But as you can see here, the images are quite dark and obscure. It's perhaps is a reflection of the outrageous environment that we are living in. Last but not the least, the modern woodcut movement initiated by Wu Xin in 1931 left legend and legacy to the development of Hong Kong printmaking. The expressive, stroke, powerful expression of woodblock printmaking still be adapted by the activists in the social political movement nowadays. So this is the two print by Chen Fa-Yun. It's for the movement of the Print Pierce series, because actually this for the Star Ferry, and people consider it is the symbolic building of the colonial era. So it's now in the warehouse. It has been taken down and in the warehouse, and people are against it. There was a movement in 2007. People try to keep it, but unfortunately, it's now been taken down in the warehouse. So it has been the woodblock printing still been using adapted by the political movement nowadays. With the historical and geographical background, Hong Kong has been identified as a hub and the international city. Artists can gain easily access to a wide range of exposure to absorb the essence of the East and West. Zhang Yi, inspired by the script in the 60s, and Jim Curious by the references from the Chinese folk art recently, are the perfect example to illustrate how Chinese culture rooted among us. As a result, the style, technique, and subject matter of the Hong Kong printmaking are so diverse and unique. What we have just mentioned in the presentation, a glimpse of woodblock printmaking from 1930 to present, is just a brief framework to snapshot the development of Hong Kong printmaking. I believe we have to do more. Further investigation is needed in the future. Thank you. So, if you have any questions, please.
You mentioned most of these prints came from one particular collection, which were once more the two collections.
One is the Hong Kong Museum of Art collection, and the other one is the Hong Kong Heritage Museum collection. So they put their collections online. So if you are interested, you can search it from the web.
Okay. On that idea of museums in Hong Kong collecting prints, of course, Hong Kong is moving forward at the moment with a lot of new cultural projects, and I'm thinking in particular of M+, which is, you know, in train. Do you know what their policy is for printmaking in terms of their whole collection outlook?
As far as I know, that they have their role divided from the Hong Kong Museum of Art and the Hong Kong Heritage Museum and also Empress.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I know, the Hong Kong Heritage Museum is the key museum to collect the contemporary print, the contemporary Hong Kong print. This is their policy. So, and also the Hong Kong Heritage Museum is the museum to create print exhibition, the contemporary print exhibition in Hong Kong.
I was just wondering whether M Plus maybe has any plan to try and either overlap that or usurp that particular role from those museums or otherwise, or even if they've assigned a place for printmaking in their collection activities.
I think I saw there are some print in their collection, but as far as I know, the acquisition policy is the Heritage Museum took the lead in this particular.
Okay, all right.
What was the relationship of the artists practicing in Hong Kong or how did for your basis in the 30s and 40s when and 50s when Woodblock was very prominent in mainland China? That's correct, am I?
That's correct.
Yeah. How did the Hong Kong artists, the artists practicing in Hong Kong, how did they differentiate themselves from, or did they? That's my question, really.
I don't think they really differentiate themselves as a Hong Kong. There's no clear identification between Hong Kong artists and Chinese artists at that moment of time, because at that day, during just after World War II, and people consider themselves as Chinese rather than Hong Kong.
Yeah.
That's totally different from nowadays.
Yeah.
And because of the war, it's easy to cross the border to get back to their hometown. They consider China, their hometown is still in China.
Yeah.
And it's different from nowadays because I consider my hometown is in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So
it was fluid. What you
yeah,
said.
yeah. People, it's easy to travel across the border, but in the 70s or the 60s, after the Cultural Revolution, the gate dropped, and so the communication of the majority stopped. So people try, or people start identifying, and then people get influence from the West, as you see from Jerry Kwan and in the 70s.
Yeah.
So so that's a mixture of it, and then they start forgetting about the because at that time it was the print renaissance in the 70s. It's something really big at that time, and they consider the modern woodcut movement is something outdated. So I think that's the situation.